The night he helped his drunk boss and almost lost everything because of it. Nobody tells you that doing the right thing has a cost. They tell you the opposite. Actually, from the time you are old enough to sit still and listen, the lesson is delivered with the confidence of people who have never had to test it personally. Do right by others, and it will come back to you. Kindness is its own reward. A clear conscience needs no defense. Jerome Washington had a clear conscience and a subpoena threat by 9:15 on a Saturday morning, which suggested that the people delivering those lessons had been working with a different set of circumstances than the ones he operated inside. He was 38 years old. He was a black man raising a 9-year-old daughter named Brianna in a 3-bedroom house in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. He worked as a lead operations analyst at a regional insurance and wealth management firm called Hargrove Financial. He had been there for 7 years without a single formal complaint, a single late report, or a single situation that had required him to explain himself to anyone above his pay grade. His wife, Adrienne, had died of an aggressive form of leukemia 14 months after her diagnosis. Brianna had been 6 years old. Jerome had been 35. There was no version of that loss that was bearable on its own terms, so he had done what he had watched his own father do and his father's father before that. He had taken the weight and he had kept walking, because the alternative was to stop, and stopping was not something a man with a 6-year-old and a mortgage and a department that needed him on Monday morning could afford to do. He was not bitter about any of it. He was precise about it. There was a difference, and it mattered to him. The night that nearly took everything he had left began, as these nights often do, with a decision that felt small at the time. The Hargrove Financial Annual Gala was held on the first Friday of October at the Meridian Ballroom downtown, a venue that specialized in the kind of marble and low lighting that made people feel they had arrived somewhere significant. Jerome had been to 3 of them. He always came, stayed exactly long enough to fulfill the unspoken obligation, and left before the second round of speeches. He had told Brianna he would be home by 9:30. He had told her this at 7:15, leaning into her bedroom doorway while she sat on the floor doing a puzzle, and she had looked up at him with her mother's eyes and said, "Okay, Daddy, I'll save you some popcorn," which was something Adrienne used to say, and which Brianna had apparently absorbed and carried forward without knowing its origin, and which still stopped Jerome in his chest every time he heard it. He was putting on his jacket in the hotel lobby at 9:05, fully intending to be home by 9:30, when he pushed through the side door to the parking garage and found his department director sitting on the concrete floor of the stairwell with one shoe off and her phone face down beside her. Her name was Renata Osei. She was 46, the director of operations, the most organized person Jerome had ever worked for. She had the kind of presence in meetings that made junior analysts sit up straighter without being asked. She had, at this moment, one shoe off, mascara tracking, and the particular stillness of someone who had stopped trying to manage things and had simply stopped. Jerome knew, without needing to be told, that this was not ordinary intoxication. Renata was not someone who drank carelessly at company events. Something had happened tonight, something beyond the open bar that had brought her to this stairwell floor. He also knew, with the full, sober awareness of a man who had spent his entire career navigating a workplace where the margin for misinterpretation ran narrower for him than for his colleagues, exactly what the scene looked like from the outside, and exactly what it would cost him if anyone walked through that door in the next 60 seconds and reached the wrong conclusion. A man in a tuxedo jacket was already moving down the stairs toward the mid-level manager. Jerome could not remember his name. Something like Bradford with a phone raised, and a smile that had more interest in it than concern. Jerome straightened up to his full height. "I've got this," he said, not an invitation to discussion. The man on the stairs looked at Jerome, looked at Renata, recalibrated something in his expression, and kept moving past them without stopping. Jerome waited until the door at the bottom of the stairwell had closed. Then he crouched down beside Renata. "Ms. Osei." She looked at him, her eyes focused slowly. "Jerome." "Yes. Can you tell me your home address? I'll get you a car." What came out was a street name and a neighborhood, but not a number. He would learn later that she had moved 2 months ago after her divorce was finalized, and that the new address had not yet been fully written into the reliable part of her memory. Her phone was locked, and she could not, in her current state, produce the passcode. The hotel had no rooms, he checked, standing at the front desk for 4 minutes while Renata sat in a lobby chair with her shoes back on and her eyes half closed. Her emergency contact on the gala's check-in sheet was her ex-husband, which was not a usable option. Jerome stood in the lobby and ran out of alternatives. He called his sister, Claudette, who lived 12 minutes away and had a key to his house. "Go," Claudette said, before he finished explaining. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Brianna won't even wake up." The drive to Jerome's house was quiet. Renata was not unconscious. She was present in the reduced way of someone operating on a fraction of their usual capacity, which was enough to sit upright and answer direct questions but not enough for anything more complex. At one point, she said, "I should call someone." "Your phone needs charging," Jerome said. "We can do that when we get there." She did not argue. His house was the kind of house that showed clearly what kind of person lived in it. The living room had a bookshelf with books that had actually been read, a small collection of Brianna's drawings tacked carefully above the baseboard heater, and a couch that was good quality and slightly worn on one armrest from years of being the spot where Jerome sat to watch television after Brianna was asleep. The kitchen table had a homework folder open on it and a purple crayon on the floor beside the chair leg. Jerome got Renata to the couch. He took her heels and set them beside the door. He brought a glass of water and set it on the coffee table with 2 ibuprofen from the cabinet. Her dress, deep green, formal, had a stain on the sleeve that was not going to survive the night intact. He found a folded set of his sister Claudette's clothes in the second bathroom cabinet, left from a weekend visit in August, close enough in size to be reasonable, and placed them on the armchair within reach. He sat down at the kitchen table. He found a yellow legal pad in the drawer beside the refrigerator, the one that held batteries, rubber bands, and the things a household accumulates without organizing, and he wrote, "My name is Jerome Washington. I am a lead analyst in your department at Hargrove Financial. Your name is Renata Osei, and you are my direct supervisor. We were both at the company gala at the Meridian Ballroom tonight. You were unwell, and I was unable to safely reach anyone on your behalf, so I brought you to my home. Nothing happened. You are sleeping on the sofa. I am sleeping on the floor. My phone number is at the bottom of this page. Please call me when you wake up, and I will take you wherever you need to go. There is water and ibuprofen on the table. I am sorry for any distress this causes." He folded the note and placed it upright against the water glass. He checked on Brianna. She was asleep with one arm thrown over the side of the bed, which was how she always slept, and the nightlight was on, and the purple stuffed elephant she had named Gerald was tucked under her chin. Claudette was asleep in the reading chair beside the window, with a novel open on her chest. Jerome stood in the doorway for a moment and breathed the particular quiet of that room. Then he went back to the living room, got a blanket from the closet shelf, lay down on the floor between the couch and the coffee table, and stayed there until morning. He thought about Adrian. He thought about the early years, before the diagnosis, when they used to lie awake after Brianna was asleep and talk about nothing in particular: plans, small grievances, things they had read, things they wanted to do. He thought about the way she had always said, whenever Jerome expressed anxiety about something he could not control, "You've done what you can do, Jerome. Now let the night be the night." He had always found this advice impossible to follow and completely correct. He let the night be the night. He was good at that, mostly. He had gotten better at it over the past 2.5 years, not because it had become easier, but because the alternative, lying awake, cataloging everything that could go wrong and everything he could not control, had a cost he had already paid in full during the 14 months of Adrian's illness, and he had learned, slowly and not without difficulty, that some costs only need to be paid once. Renata came awake at 6:23, with the particular violence of a person whose body is surfacing from somewhere it did not choose to go. The ceiling was not hers. The sofa was not hers. The morning light coming through the curtains fell at an angle she did not recognize. Her dress was stained, and she was not wearing her shoes, and there was a glass of water and a folded piece of paper on the coffee table, and she was in someone's house, and she did not know whose. She sat up. The room shifted. She waited. Her phone was on the end table, fully charged, plugged into a cable she had not put there. She picked up the phone. She did not look at the paper. She called her cousin, Denise, who was 32 years old, a paralegal, and the person Renata had always called first in a crisis, for approximately the same reasons a person carries a fire extinguisher, not because they expected to need it, but because they felt better knowing exactly where it was. Denise answered on the second ring. "Netta, what's wrong?" Renata told her what she knew. The party, the gap, waking up here, a man from work, her subordinate somewhere in the house. Denise's voice changed in the way Renata recognized from watching her work. It became focused, rapid, practical. "Listen to me. Do not engage with him. Do not answer anything he says. You need to call HR. Does your company have an after-hours HR line? There is an emergency contact number, yes. Call it now, before he wakes up, before he can get ahead of this. Renata, you are in a custody situation. You know what Gerald's lawyers are looking for." She did know. The divorce from her ex-husband Gerald had been finalized 8 months ago after 3 years of what Gerald's family had called incompatibility and Renata had called survival. Their son, Tobias, was 11 years old, and Gerald had been contesting the custody arrangement since before the ink was dry on the settlement. His legal team had already submitted 2 filings, the second of which had referenced Renata's attendance at a professional conference in Chicago that had run a day over schedule, framing it as evidence of prioritizing career over family. She had been in Chicago for 4 days on a mandatory work event, but the filing had been written by people who were paid to make 4 days sound like abandonment. She was exhausted in the way that only a certain kind of sustained, low-grade legal warfare produces, not broken, just worn at the edges, in the places where the worry never fully left. "I'll send a message to your HR emergency line right now," Denise said, "on your behalf, just to establish the time. It is not an accusation. It is a timestamp." "Denise, you can sort out what it means later. Right now, you need to be the first one on record. Call me back in 5 minutes." The call ended. Renata held the phone. On the coffee table, the folded note leaned against the water glass in the manner of something patient, something waiting to be given its turn. She did not pick it up. She heard a door, small footsteps, the unhurried shuffle of a child not yet fully awake. The girl appeared in the hallway doorway, holding a stuffed purple elephant by one ear, with the easy grip of someone who had been carrying this particular animal for a long time. She had her pajamas on, and her hair was in 2 braids that had seen better days. She looked at Renata with calm, clear eyes. She did not appear startled. She appeared interested. "You're the sick lady," she said. "Ah, yes, I suppose I am. Daddy brought you home because you couldn't get back by yourself." The girl moved to the armchair across the room and sat in it sideways, legs hanging over the arm, elephant in her lap. "He missed my recital." The word landed. "Your recital," Renata repeated. "I play violin. It was my first time in the big hall. I had a solo." The girl said this without accusation. She was reporting facts. "Daddy always comes to everything. He has never missed anything before." She paused. "He watched Aunt Claudette's video 3 times last night and cried, but he said it was because the audio was bad." Renata looked at the girl. "I'm sorry he missed it," she said. "I'm very sorry." The girl shrugged, the way children shrug when they have processed a disappointment and made peace with it and are prepared to demonstrate that the processing is complete. "It is okay." He said, "There will be the winter concert, and he will be there for that one." She looked at Renata with the straightforward assessment of a child who had decided to be direct. "Are you feeling better?" "A little. Do you want cereal?" "We have 2 kinds." "No, thank you. That is very kind of you. I'm Brianna." "Renata." Brianna appeared to find this acceptable. She climbed out of the chair, tucked the elephant under her arm, and went to the kitchen to see to her own breakfast, leaving Renata alone in the living room with the silence and the morning light and the note still standing against the glass on the coffee table. Renata looked at the room. On the refrigerator, secured by a small magnet in the shape of a music note, was a printed school calendar covered in handwritten additions, Brianna's violin practice schedule, a dentist appointment, a school field trip. The word recital had been written in capital letters across the first Friday of October and underlined twice. Someone had drawn a small star beside it. On the wall above the bookshelf, there was a framed photograph. Jerome, younger, laughing. A woman with a natural smile that suggested she laughed often and meant it. A Brianna who could not have been older than 3, seated between them on what appeared to be a picnic blanket, completely uninterested in the camera, focused entirely on something in her hand. The woman in the photograph was not in this house. Renata understood this without needing to ask. She looked at the floor. The blanket was folded in a loose square near the end of the coffee table. Beneath it, the hardwood showed no cushion, no pillow, nothing between the man who had slept there and the floor. 6 feet from where she had spent the night on a couch with a water glass within reach and her phone charging. Renata reached forward. She picked up the note. She read it once. She read it twice. She set it down and pressed both hands flat on her thighs and sat with the information for a moment. Not the information in the note, which was straightforward, but the information about herself that the note had just made it impossible to avoid. She was the one who had not read it immediately. She was the one who had called Denise before she had given the room 30 seconds of honest attention. And Denise's message sent in her name at 6:28 in the morning to an HR emergency line was sitting in someone's inbox right now. Jerome came out of Brianna's room at 6:50 to find Renata standing in the living room holding the note. He was dressed. He looked like a man who had not slept, which was accurate, but he carried it in the way of someone who had made the decision not to let it show more than it had to. He read the situation in a single sweep. Renata standing, the note in her hands, an expression on her face that was more complicated than fear, and he stayed where he was. "Good morning," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Jerome." She held up the note slightly, the way you hold something up when you want to acknowledge its existence before anything else. "I read it. I'm glad. I also called my cousin before I read it." She said this directly, without softening it, because she understood that he deserved the unvarnished version. "She sent a message to our HR emergency line on my behalf." Jerome was quiet for 3 seconds. He did not change his expression, but something in his posture shifted, the barely perceptible adjustment of a person absorbing news they had not entirely ruled out, but had been hoping would not arrive. "Okay," he said. "I am going to get it retracted. Right now. Before anything moves." He looked at her steadily. "All right. I wanted you to know before I called, not after." She held his gaze. "You should know what happened, and what I am doing about it. I appreciate that." His phone lit up on the kitchen counter. He glanced at it. Then he walked over and read the message. He set the phone back down with the deliberate care of a man keeping his hands from doing anything he would not be able to take back. "HR already has it," he said. That was their automated acknowledgement. The color in Renata's face shifted. "How long ago did you get this?" "Just now. Just this message." She was already dialing Denise. Jerome stood in his kitchen and listened to Renata's half of the conversation with the same focused attention he gave to anything that determined how a situation was going to resolve, which was to say, complete attention, no assumptions. He heard, "Retract it, Denise. Right now. I read the note. I read it and I know what happened, and this man did nothing wrong. Get it back." He heard Denise's voice, too low to make out words. He heard Renata say, "I understand the risk. I am telling you to retract it." Then she called HR. She told the HR director, a careful, methodical woman named Patricia Cross, everything she could confirm, everything she had reconstructed, and the distinction between the two. She said Jerome had acted appropriately at every point. She said the message sent on her behalf did not represent her account and should be disregarded. She said she accepted responsibility for the confusion caused by the sequence of events, and she said it without hedging, because hedging was a form of the same failure she was trying to correct, and she was not going to repeat it inside the correction itself. Then she said she wanted the hotel's security footage reviewed. It took most of the morning. Formal requests, coordination between the hotel and the company's legal team, a three-way call that Jerome was not part of and only heard about afterward. The footage showed 8 minutes and 40 seconds of relevant material. It showed a stairwell door at 9:07. It showed the man named Bradford coming down the stairs and pausing near a woman sitting on the floor with one shoe off. It showed Jerome arriving 11 seconds later. It showed the exchange between Jerome and Bradford brief, physical without contact, decisive, and Bradford continuing down the stairs and through the door. Then it showed the lobby. Jerome stood near the front desk for 9 minutes. He made calls, not anxiously, not with visible distress, just steadily, one after another, with the patience of a person working through a list. The footage showed him speak with the concierge twice. It showed him stand with the phone to his ear, waiting, each time, for an answer that did not come. At the 8-minute mark, a call was answered. He visibly exhaled. Denise watched the footage beside Renata in Patricia Cross's office. Neither of them spoke for the last 3 minutes of the clip. When it finished, Denise said, quietly and without legal inflection, "He spent 9 minutes in that lobby, trying to find someone else to do this." "Yes," Renata said, "because he knew what it would cost him if he was the one." "Yes." Patricia Cross closed the laptop. "The preliminary message has been formally withdrawn. There is no open file." She looked at Renata. "The note has been photographed and retained as context. Off the record, it is a very careful note." Renata said nothing. She sat with the specific weight of a person who had come very close to a line and was now standing on the near side of it, looking back at how close. She came to Jerome's house on a Thursday. 6 days after Patricia Cross had closed the matter, Renata called Jerome and asked if she could stop by after work. He said yes. She arrived at 6:15, still in her work clothes, holding nothing. Jerome opened the door. Brianna was on the living room rug doing her homework with her violin case open beside her, which meant she had been practicing and had taken a homework break, or had been doing homework and had taken a practice break, or had been doing both simultaneously, which was not technically possible, but which Brianna regularly attempted. She looked up. "Hi," she said. "Hi, Brianna," Renata said. "Is that a full-size violin?" Brianna looked at the case. 3/4 size. "I will get a full size when I am 11. Mr. Kaminsky says I might be ready early." She said this with the particular care of someone reporting a fact they consider important and do not want misquoted. "That is worth being proud of," Renata said. Brianna considered this assessment, accepted it, and returned to her homework. Renata turned to Jerome. He was standing near the kitchen doorway, arms loosely at his sides, with the expression of a man who had made the decision to receive whatever was coming without deciding in advance how much of it to accept. He looked, she thought, like someone who had been through enough to know that guarding against honesty was more expensive than the alternative. "I owe you a real apology," she said. "Not the kind that puts itself in context until the context does most of the work." She did not look away. I woke up scared, and instead of taking 30 seconds to look at what was in front of me, I handed the situation to someone else and let them act on my behalf before I had any idea what the actual situation was. Her voice was even. She had thought carefully about how to say this, because she understood that the quality of an apology lives or dies in its specificity. A message went out under my name that could have ended your career, could have affected your custody arrangement, could have changed Brianna's life. She let the weight of that stand without rushing past it. "I am sorry. Not for a misunderstanding, for a choice. I had a note on the table in front of me, and I did not read it. That is on me and nobody else." Jerome stood with that for a moment. In the living room, a page turned. He had thought, over the past 6 days, about what he would say if this moment came. He had not arrived at a script. He had arrived at something simpler, a decision not to make it harder than it needed to be, because she had come here and said the true thing and not softened it, and that deserved to be met in kind. "You were scared," Jerome said finally. "I have been scared in ways that made me move before I thought. I understand it. That does not make it acceptable." "No," he said. "It does not. But you came back and you fixed it, and that took something." He looked at her steadily. "That matters to me." Renata held his gaze. She understood that what he had given her was not forgiveness as a transaction, but something more considered a recognition of what had happened, offered by a man who had every right to give less, and who had chosen to give this anyway. She received it for exactly what it was. "Thank you," she said, "for what you did that night. I just did what needed doing." "I know," she said. "That is the part that I keep thinking about." 5 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon in November, Jerome sat in the 3rd row of the Whitmore Elementary School auditorium with a borrowed camcorder on a small tripod and his phone as backup, because he had decided that redundancy was appropriate for an event of this magnitude. The magnitude, specifically, was Brianna's first solo in the winter concert. 32 bars of a simplified arrangement that she had been practicing since September, including 3 weeks before the piece had been officially assigned, because Brianna had found the sheet music in the folder Mr. Kaminsky kept on his piano stand and had simply started learning it on her own without telling anyone. Jerome had arrived 40 minutes early. When Brianna walked out onto the stage in her white concert shirt, she did what she always did: found him in the audience before she found anything else, with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew he would be there and simply needed to confirm the row. When she located him, something in her posture settled, the subtle dropping of a held breath. He raised 2 fingers. She straightened her bow arm and faced the music stand. Near the back of the auditorium, in a seat beside the far aisle, Renata sat alone. She had found the concert information in the school's public calendar, the same one listed on the community board at the coffee shop 3 blocks from the office, and she had come without telling Jerome because this was not about being seen. It was about being present in the room where the thing he had sacrificed had been meant to happen, and bearing witness to it now that he had it back. When Brianna lifted her bow for the opening of her solo, Renata clasped her hands in her lap and did not move. The notes rose clear and careful in the auditorium, a 9-year-old's hands on a 3/4 size instrument, every note placed with the particular concentration of someone who had practiced them into muscle memory, and was now, for the first time, playing them in front of people who had not heard them before. Jerome was on the edge of his seat by the 3rd bar. Renata watched him watch his daughter and felt the full, unambiguous weight of what she had almost taken from him, and also the full, unambiguous weight of having been the one to pull it back. Both things were true. She had learned, in the months since Gerald's lawyers had begun their campaign to reduce her life to a series of liabilities, that most important things were like that: not one thing or the other, but both things at once, requiring a person to hold them simultaneously, without collapsing either into the other. Brianna finished the solo. The auditorium came in with applause. Jerome was already on his feet. The revised events policy was ratified by the executive committee on the 2nd Monday of December. Renata had written it herself across 3 evenings after Tobias was asleep, at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she kept forgetting to drink. It was straightforward and specific. Mandatory safe transportation arrangements for all company events at which alcohol was served. A designated staff support role at gatherings exceeding 35 people. And a formal good faith clause protecting any employee who rendered assistance to a colleague in distress from disciplinary action arising from that assistance. The committee reviewed it for 20 minutes and asked 4 questions. The 4th question was whether the policy had originated from a specific event within the company. Renata said yes. She said it clearly, with no qualification, holding the question's gaze. No one pushed further. The vote was 8-0. Jerome learned about it in an email on a Tuesday morning. He read it at his desk, with his 2nd coffee of the day and his office door open, the way he always kept it. He read it through once, then again. He sat for a moment with the particular quality of attention that belongs to things that are not large in themselves but carry the weight of something larger. He did not tell anyone in the office. He picked Brianna up from school that afternoon, and on the drive home she asked if she could have hot chocolate, and he said yes, and they stopped at the place on 5th Avenue that she liked because they put exactly 2 marshmallows in without being asked, which she considered evidence of a well-run establishment. They sat at the counter on high stools, which Brianna preferred because she could swing her feet. "Daddy," she said. "Yeah, B." Miss Osei seemed nice. "At my concert." Jerome looked at her. "You saw her?" "She was in the back row. She clapped the loudest after my solo." Brianna wrapped both hands around her mug. "I think she came because she felt bad about missing the other one." Jerome was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "I think you might be right." Brianna nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already worked out. She was quiet for a moment, the way she got quiet when she was thinking something through from the beginning rather than just from where she had arrived. "Daddy," she said again. "Yeah. Do you think people mostly try to do the right thing? Or do they mostly just do whatever is easiest, and then feel bad about it later?" Jerome thought about Preston Cole walking down the hotel corridor, with his hands in his pockets. He thought about the 9 minutes in the lobby, the 7 unanswered calls. He thought about a note folded against a water glass, and a woman picking it up on the second try, and a vote of 8-0 on a Monday morning in December. I think most people want to do the right thing, he said. I think it is harder than they expect. I think some of them figure that out in time, and some of them don't. Brianna considered this with the seriousness it deserved. I think you always do the right thing, she said. I try, he said. You do, she said, with the simple finality of someone issuing a verdict they have no intention of revisiting. She drank her hot chocolate. He drank his. Outside, the first hard cold of November had settled on Columbus, and the street was quiet in the early dark, and the two of them sat at the counter in the warm light of a place that put exactly 2 marshmallows in without being asked, and for the length of a cup of hot chocolate, the world asked nothing difficult of either of them at all. That was enough. That was, Jerome Washington had learned, always enough.